Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. Before we start, I want to start off with some housekeeping rules. If you have any questions, please write them using the Q&A function in the toolbar at the bottom of your screen. Questions will be answered by the speakers at the end of today's session. Today we have Adrian Hallett, Director of the Coalition for Life Sciences, and Jennifer Zeitzer, the Deputy Executive Director at the Federation of American Societies for Experimental Biology. They're here to share insights on the most effective ways to advocate for science, along with tips for conducting a successful congressional meeting. So without further ado, I will pass it off to Adrian to get us started.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for having me here. As you may or may not know, ASBMB is a proud member of the Coalition for Life Sciences, and one of your representatives, actually, I saw in the participants. So, Joseph, hello. Um, if you have questions or comments that you want to get to CLS, he's your guy. Um, so I worked on Capitol Hill for about 16 years. I was on the Senate Appropriations Committee that had oversight of NIH. And there are a few Congress, I always say for people who are going there to work or to intern or to do a fellowship, Congress is a very particular culture, and you either love it or you hate it, and you know immediately. So when you're going to visit, that culture is on display. When you go to visit Capitol Hill, what you should know is that number one, the staffs are very small. And what that means is that the portfolio of the person you meet is broad. The person you are talking to is the right person. They do oversee NIH. But in a typical House office, there are 4 to 5 what we call legislative assistants. They also write constituent mail. And if you think about the world of policy, you have taxes, you have transportation, you have environment, you have law enforcement, judiciary, defense. You have all of these things, and they have to be split up 4 ways. So usually the person who does biomedical research also does healthcare, also does social services, sometimes also does education, often does labor, worker safety. They have a broad authority. So what you care about is a small sliver of what they have to be able to learn about quickly, make recommendations to their boss, and put their boss in a situation where they won't be embarrassed, right? Or they won't be off base from their constituents. So that person that you are meeting with is typically very young. Salaries are not high on Capitol Hill. Once you decide to get married and buy a condo and have a baby, you cannot afford to work on Capitol Hill. So the person you meet with will typically be in their early 20s. They will not know a lot about what you're coming to talk about. So it can feel like a letdown when you walk in and you meet this 22-year-old who doesn't have a lot of time for you. Um, it is a reasonable mistake to make, to be let down, to kind of blow off the meeting, to think it doesn't matter. Nothing could be further from the truth. The person you're meeting with has the ear of the congressman or the senator. The person you're meeting with is incredibly bright and able to make judgments very quickly. That is their job. That is what they do all day, every day. So when you go to Capitol Hill, when you're talking to somebody from Capitol Hill, be your genuine self, um, and give respect, even if it feels like that's not appropriate. These people really are very busy, and they do have the ear of sometimes the highest policymakers in our country. So that's the number one thing I would tell you. The number two thing I would tell you is if you understand the environment that you're working in, groups do lobby days, right? groups just like ASBMB. All of us bring constituents up to talk to them, usually in March and April, right when the president's budget is out. We know what we're asking for in appropriations, but the process has not started yet. On those days, when I was on Capitol Hill, I would do 15, 20-minute meetings all day, every day. That means in a typical 10-hour day, and that is their days are typically 10 to 12 hours, I would meet with hundreds of groups in a week. Um, and all of them would come to me with, this is who we are, this is what we want, and they would give me excellent reasons. Everybody had excellent reasons for why the federal government should invest in that thing that they cared about. And they would give me jobs numbers, and they would tell me, they would give me the global competition. Like everybody gives really good reasons, and I would nod along knowing that there's not enough money in the world to fund everything everybody wants. The things that stuck with me, the thing you want to do when you're in an office is you want to build a bridge to that staffer. You want to be the person that they call 3 months later when some issue is on their desk, they don't know anything about it. Capitol Hill staffers are excellent learners, but they are also excellent at picking up the phone and calling anybody they know who can give them the information they need to advise their bosses. You want to be that phone call. The way to do that is to be your authentic self. I know it's very hard. It's very hard to trust that you are everything you need in that meeting, that the talking points that ASBMB will write for you, and they will, and they'll be wonderful. They'll be very compelling and interesting. You want to create a personal connection. That means tell your story. Don't be afraid of the passion that you have. Show them that because that's what they will remember. The stories are the things I remembered at the end of my day, at the end of my week, at the end of that long slog of constituent visits. What I remembered were the mom who was telling me the story of her baby and how, the autistic child and the lights went out. The young researcher who told me, oh, I got into science because I had a fourth grade teacher who just inspired me. Or, if you are a very senior researcher and you're in a group, let the young researchers talk too, because it's that kind of promise. What do you want to do for our country? What do you want to do for the American people? That's what will inspire the people on Capitol Hill. I would think about not just what you want to tell them, but what they need to hear. What do Capitol Hill staffers need to hear? What do members of Congress need to hear? Do they need to know the name of the protein? Probably not. Do they need to know that you are feeling uncertain about your career? That you feel like you've made real strides in understanding the thing that you want to understand? And if you could understand it, right? Kathleen Carrico, if she could understand what messenger RNA does, well, what will that mean for the American public? What would that mean for humanity? Those are the kind of things that stick in staffers' mind when they understand what's at stake. So I think those are the things that I wanted to tell you. You are enough. You don't have to be afraid. These are people, but do be kind, be gracious. Not every staffer is going to be great to talk to. They're they're people like anybody else. Most of them are very extroverted. So like they will they do this, they do meetings all the time. That's what they're very good at. Some of them are just not, they're introverts and they've had 20 meetings before they met you today, and they're just tapped out. So don't take it personally. Everybody has a personality. You're going to encounter a lot of them. Um, and just be yourself. That's my best advice. I said I was going to take 10 minutes, and that was 10 minutes exactly.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Adrian. And for if anyone has any questions for Adrian, please put them in the Q&A function in your toolbar. Now we're going to pass it on to Jennifer Zeitzer. Jennifer, take it away.
Thank you. Well, Adrian set this up perfectly, and I want to start off by saying I 100,000 million% endorse everything Adrian just said. And the best part is you heard it from a former staffer, and as she noted, did a bunch of those meetings. So I have actually been on hundreds and hundreds of the other side of those meetings by being the person in the room speaking with someone like Adrian. So I just want to,
Sometimes Adrian.
and sometimes actually that's true. I don't have a lifetime count on the number of times I've met with Adrian, but I would like everyone to know that every time was an amazing experience.
Oh, yes. Oh,
He was one of my favorite people to meet with on the Hill.
Uh-huh.
100%. So what I want to do is maybe just elaborate and go a couple steps further and sort of co-sign what Adrian just said, but maybe give you a few other in-depth tips. So I'm not going to repeat what she just said, but I will add a couple of things. You are in a unique position, whether you're a postdoc or you're a NIH funded or NSF funded investigator, or you're a, science lab manager working for an NIH or NSF funded investigator, to explain why it is so important for the federal government to fund biomedical research, because you live it, you feel it, you breathe it every day. So you do bring that unique perspective. Right now, we're in a very interesting time. We are just coming up, well, we're at the end of the first year of the new Congress that started in January of 2025. There are a lot of new faces on Capitol Hill right now. So 14 new senators, a really big freshman class, and 65 new members of the House. Most of these individuals were coming into their new jobs like drinking from a fire hose. They had so much going on. They had to meet with constituents, set up their offices, figure out how to vote. And so it was an overwhelming time. And as Adrian noted, you want to become that go-to person that people in that congressional office go to when they need an answer to a question or they need to talk to somebody, and they want to know that the person they are talking to is credible and can be trusted. The other thing, because I'm pretty sure there's some scientists on this call, and I know you guys love data, Purple Strategies and Political just published a new report, I think it was about a week ago, that specifically looked at what happened in 2025 that impacted the advocacy that organizations like ASBMB and FASB do. I'm remiss in not acknowledging that ASBMB is also a proud and active member of FASB as well. This survey basically surveyed almost 400 insiders in coalitions, in corporate America, in lobbying firms, in organizations, and on Capitol Hill about, all right, so what's changed in 2025, just given the, I'm going to politely say, new political environment. Read into that what you wish. And one of the things that did not surprise me was that direct engagement with lawmakers is really at the top of the list for delivering that impact and having that impact. And then you can see kind of building down this chart, the things that you might anticipate, like policy research and white papers. 29%, nobody has time to read a white paper at this point. So the ability to go in and directly speak with a lawmaker or their staff, that is where you're going to have the most impact, even in what's been happening with all of the changes in 2025. So how do you get started? First and foremost, I highly recommend you need to be a constituent of the congressional office, House or Senate that you're meeting with. And by constituent, I mean live or work in that district. You don't necessarily have to vote there, and they probably are not going to check your voting affiliation. They don't have that kind of time. But you have to have a legitimate reason for being there. So if you do not live or work in Texas, it's going to be tough for you to have a conversation with Senator Cruz's staff because Senator Cruz's staff, his whole job is to serve the citizens and people in Texas. So make sure that you're a constituent. And there's an easy way to figure that out. Just go to house.gov or senate.gov, enter your zip code, and that'll tell you where you are. Um, it does take time and effort to build that relationship. One of the frustrating things about advocacy is the incredibly long arc. So, for example, as Adrian noted, this time last year, we started to talk about the 2026 budget for NIH. Hey, guess what? It's almost a year later, and we still do not know what the 2026 budget is for NIH. So, a lot of advocacy is like that movie Groundhog Day. You find yourself repeating the same day over and over again. That's okay. Um, Also, as Adrian noted, congressional staff are just so busy. You may have to reach out to them a couple of times to really get their attention. Do not be offended if you do not get a response to your email or request for a meeting the first try. Okay. It's not that they don't like you, it's that they got, they're balancing in some cases thousands of meeting requests and they just didn't get back to you. So don't be discouraged. Right now, it is really hard to break through all of the noise, and it probably feels like there's a new fire that starts every day. So your timing really, really does matter, particularly if you're talking about funding. Not super effective to contact your member of Congress after they just took a vote on the bill that funds NIH. So rely on ASBMB to help you figure out when is the best time to go and reach out to your members of Congress. And you can always check with Rachel and the team there if you're not quite sure. And then, of course, whatever resources you share, those had better be credible. So I will say caution, AI can be your friend, but it can also be your enemy. Um, Rely on things that you know you can trust. If ASBMB sent it to you, it is trustworthy, it has been vetted, and is worthy of sharing with a congressional office. The same thing with FASM. If it's coming from your own institution, same thing. If it's coming from an organization or a coalition that you have a volunteer role in or that you trust, absolutely. If it's something someone sent you because they saw it on the internet, be a little bit careful. In terms of how to engage, there's different ways. You can meet with your member of Congress or their staff in DC or at home. It does not have to be here in Washington, DC. Every senator has multiple offices across their state, and every House member has at least one office in their district. And go to their website, find out where those are. I highly, highly encourage you to do that advocacy at home and build a relationship with the person in the district office. And they will probably tell you, well, you really should follow up with my team in DC. You can do that as well, too. But it is false to say that the only way you can be effective is to come to Washington. Certainly call and email your members of Congress. I know this sounds crazy in the year of our Lord 2026. I'm recommending email, but because of how hard it is to get actual physical mail to members of Congress these days, email is still viable. It's probably Congress that has kept email alive as a communications technology, quite frankly. Phone calls, if you can get through, are terrific. Admittedly, these days, the phones ring off the hook in congressional offices. It is perfectly acceptable to communicate with your members of Congress on social media, but I will caution you to please be polite and not be a troll. So if they post something on X that you want to react to, maybe they announced that they visited a research lab in their state or their district, you can go ahead and thank them. If they say something that you don't agree with, you can politely disagree with them and say, I would love to chat with you, or as someone in your district who's affected by this issue, I disagree. But you do not need to get into a Twitter fight with your member of Congress at 3 a.m. It's also probably not good for your mental health. Highly encourage you, if you're able, to write an op-ed or letter to the editor of your local newspaper. Believe it or not, members of Congress do pay close attention to their local press. I know people are like, well, I want to get something in the New York Times or the Wall Street Journal. That's great, and congratulations if you can do that. But do not overlook the importance of the Hometown Herald. There is someone on their staff who is looking at their local press, probably more than the national press these days. And quite frankly, some of the smaller hometown newspapers are easier to get into, and they will accept and publish digital submissions. So they don't even have to do it in a printed paper. And then this one, go carefully into the dark night, participating in a town hall meeting. Those can get a little bit out of control. And you all, I understand if you're like, that is not on my list of things I would like to do, Jennifer. But if you get a chance to go to a town hall meeting and can speak with the member of Congress at their aid, by all means do so. And so a lot of them are having teletown halls, and that can be sometimes a little bit easier as well, too. So, like I said, caution on that one. I understand if you do not feel like leveling up on that. All right, very, very important what you can do. I have to put this disclaimer in here because if I don't, every federal affairs staff person from every university across these great United States will be calling me tomorrow to yell at me. So first things first, if you work for an academic institution or higher ed, you need to understand what the rules are for faculty and staff. And if you're not sure, please ask. I assure you it is always easier to ask someone what you can and cannot do as an official of the institution than to wind up in the dean or provost's office explaining why you were lobbying on Capitol Hill illegally. So please ask. Um, Please always use a personal email address and your personal laptop or device when reaching out and contacting members of Congress, even if it's to request an appointment. This will ensure that you're doing this on your own time and are following your institution's rules. When you contact your member of Congress, understand which affiliation you're allowed to use. If you work for an institution of higher education or a university, ask that question as well. And if you're not allowed to use that, then you can, and you're a member of ASBMB, absolutely you can use your ASBMB role. That's why ASBMB exists, to allow you to partly to allow you to advocate as a member of the society. And then finally, if you submit an op-ed or letter to the editor, I always recommend doing so in your capacity as a resident of that state or a private citizen, and not signing it as a staff person from your institution or work. If you do that, you will really need to talk to the communications team at your institution to make sure that you have their permission. Again, you do not want to wind up in the dean's office getting in trouble for something. All right, influencing members of Congress. I think Adrian really covered it, but there's really 4 things that you need to do. If you can master these 4 feats of strength, you will be a successful advocate. First and foremost, do not go into a conversation or a meeting with a member of Congress or their staff unsure of what action you want them to take. You need to ask them to do something. I guarantee you will confuse the staff person or the member of Congress you're meeting with if you do not ask them to do something. Their entire existence is people coming into their office asking them to do something. And when they're home at the 4th of July parade, people are asking them to do something. If they run into people in the airports, same thing. You need to explain why this is important to you. Why do you care? Adrian's advice, be your authentic self, spot on. I wouldn't just stray from that. They may ask you, and they likely will, what are the current and or potential local impacts? If, for example, if they're a member of the House of Representatives, they probably do not care that much what happens outside their own congressional district. They want to know, why does this matter to me at home? My biggest employer is an Air Force base, and you're telling me research funding is important? The rest of the district is farmland. Again, I'm confused. Why is this important? And then what personal connections do voters have? This goes back to that authenticity. You can speak from your capacity as a human being who watched a loved one die from an illness. You can speak from your capacity as a postdoc who would love to be a researcher and have their own research lab and has now invested 7+ years in education. So you can do the personal and the professional, but you need to disclose what is your connection. And by disclose, I mean just share some information. I'm not saying tell your life story. You also need to be prepared. Again, what do you want the member of Congress to do? We often refer to this as they ask. You also need to be clear on whether or not Congress can take this action. If you have a question about that, again, your team at ASB&B can help advise you and say, so I have this idea and I have this ask, but I'm not sure if this is what Congress can do. And then, of course, why? And ASB&B can help you figure out the why if that's not immediately clear to you. Personalize the message, as we talked about. And then, of course, this issue again of credibility. If you're going to be sharing data or statistics, make sure you got a source for that and you're willing to cite that source and share that with the person you're meeting with or the congressional office. use tools that are available to you. ASB&B has some great ones. FASB has some great ones as well too. I think our most popular are state and district research funding fact sheets. We produce these every year. I will tell you that the next ones are going to come out in early March, in time for ASB&B's big Capitol Hill Day. What we do is we take data from federal funding sources like NIH and NSF, things that is publicly available. We just pull it off the website, we clean it up and put it together so it looks a little prettier than, with all due respect to the NIH reporter database, this is more visually pleasing. And these are publicly available on our website. In addition, you can get them from ASBMB. And we always have the latest data that we can possibly find. So the series that's coming out in March of this year will report on agency spending in fiscal year 2025, the year that just wrapped up. And again, these are meant to be sort of like kind of fact sheet infographic hybrids. Instant information that are available to present to the person you're meeting with to help them understand why this issue is important to you. And then finally, or near the end here, a couple of just pro tips to really make that impact. And especially if you have an in-person meeting, there's a couple things you're going to want to do to follow up. Please send a thank you note after every meeting, because members of Congress and their staff get hundreds of emails, but very few thank yous. And so you can just put thank you in the subject line, and that probably means it will get opened sooner. Make sure that if you agreed to provide any follow-up information, if they asked you, I recommend the 24 to 48 hour rules. Things move pretty quickly on Capitol Hill sometimes, and if the person you met with asked that question, they may need it. They may need the information quickly, but forgot to mention that to you. This is the thank you email is also a great way to remind the person you met with if they promised to get you anything. So for example, if they said, oh, my boss sent a letter about NIH funding, and make sure you ask them, can I see that? Especially if they said, I'll share it with you. They may not remember that they said that they were going to do that because, again, when you do a couple hundred meetings a day, it gets a little hard. Same thing if you met with a staff person and they said, I don't know my boss's position on that issue, I will have to get back to you. And then finally, it's a great idea to humble brag about what you've been doing. Keep your society like ASB&B abreast of what you're doing. They're on Capitol Hill all the time too, but information is currency on Capitol Hill. And so you can never have too much of that. So even if you're on Capitol Hill and you have a couple meetings, ASB&B would love to hear that because it will either give them additional information they didn't have or just backstop and reaffirm what they've already been hearing. And the same thing to your graduate student group, so everybody knows what's going on. A couple tips for submitting a letter or op-ed. The biggest thing is, again, I recommend you do a local newspaper. First things first, find out if they accept unsolicited, citizen input or resident input, and find out what the rules are. There probably will be a word limit. Do not exceed that word limit because your letter will be ejected automatically. Make sure you understand what the authorship rules are, and they will tell that, i.e., who can sign them. And absolutely pay attention to the formatting. Just like a grant application, if someone tells you to submit something with a 1-inch margin on each side, they're serious about that. Don't get your letter rejected for a simple formatting error. Never, ever, ever, never submit the same letter to multiple newspapers at the same time. First of all, they all talk to each other. Most of them will want original submissions, and it will look like you are shopping something around just to get it published. And then finally, again, understand what you're able to do as a staff person at your institution. Just a quick couple key things to kind of keep you motivated and say that, Adrian, I know what we're talking about. If you had asked me to speak on this webinar at this point last year, I probably would have said no, only because things look bad and bleak. But we are starting to see the impact of the advocacy that we've been doing for the last year. I know it may not seem like that. And if you just open, and if you just looked at some headlines and things like that, you might not actually understand. Members of Congress are really starting to speak up and speak out and do their jobs. So this is just a compilation of things. I know it's controversial to use X, but this is where things are happening. Katie Britt has been a real leader on NIH funding this last year and press releases and things like that. So wanted to make sure you guys did not miss this. Same thing, advocacy matters. I'm a broken record on this. But we are now finally starting to see the impact of all the work that we did in 2025. fingers crossed, within the next week or two, we will see the final funding level for fiscal year 2026 for NIH, and it will be a number that is bigger than the one in 2024. Sorry, 2025. Um, we already know well, fingers crossed on that. The bill funding NSF is moving through Congress right now. There is a minor haircut to NSF, but I will tell you it is better than the proposal that came from the administration, which was about a 60% cut. There's like a 2% cut to NSF right now. I will not call a 2% cut a win. I'm not that crazy. I will call it a victory instead. We can talk about the difference during the Q&A. Anyway, so these are just some of the major headlines about what's happening right now. And then I want to end with the 3 C's of effective advocacy. You want clarity, consistency, and collaboration. Clarity, message and data. Consistency, one set of talking points and repurpose them for your emails, your phone calls, your in-person visits, and your social media posts. Advocacy is not something where you want 4 different versions of different things and choose your own adventure type of outcomes. It is most important, especially as we try to break through the noise right now, the consistency of that. And then on the collaboration, work together. Many voices are going to be louder and stronger. It is true that a rising tide will lift many boats. So work with ASB&B and work with CLS, and they will help guide you, because right now the groups working together are the ones having the most success. And then finally, staying informed. You can follow ASB&B on social media. Highly recommend that, although I'm pretty sure most of you already do. FASTSUB's also on the socials. I will say that we are right now using LinkedIn primarily to keep everyone abreast of what's happening on Capitol Hill, just because it's become a kind of a go-to for us. Also because X. We're new to Blue Sky, so don't have a big following there. That's the other reason. We have our bi-weekly newsletter that goes out that tells you what's going on in DC, and you can sign up for that as well. I promise you it's a quick read. It's the kind of thing you can read while you're in between your doom scrolling. And then finally, invite you to connect with me on LinkedIn if you'd like. Here's how you reach me. I will stop talking now so we can get into the Q&A, and look forward to engaging with all of you on that.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. So we have some great questions for you both here. Um, let's start off with this question. It says, any examples of a bad meeting with staffers? What if they say bad things about NIH, etc.? Do you have any strategies for getting a meeting back on track if needed? I think that's a good question.
Adrian, do you want to go first as the former staffer? If not, I can tell some stories.
Oh, uh, Adrian, I think you may be.
Yes, of course. Of course there are bad meetings, right? Everybody has bad meetings. I personally have a little pet peeve when people say Congress thinks or Congress says. Congress has 535 offices and they don't agree on very much. So your experience is it's gonna be with individuals, and some of them are jerks. Like they just are. I have had meetings where staffers, I mean, I was the congressional relations person for NIH during the pandemic. So I had staffers who I would lay out Tony Fauci's financials. I mean, he's in his 80s, most of it's mutual funds, and they just did not believe me, you know? So if there's no smoking gun, it must mean I'm hiding the smoking gun. Um, so they can be belligerent. They can also just be dismissive, looking at their phone, doing something else, getting goodbye. Um, it, those are all examples of bad meetings. Can be actively bad, where they're saying bad things. They can be passively bad, where they're just not interested, not listening. It's okay. It happens all the time. Most of your meetings should be good, we hope. Um, but some will be bad. If it goes, okay, so if it's passively bad, I would say, again, tell your story.
Mhm.
It, any sort of emotional connection you can put on the table might get them to look up from their phone. I don't know. Um, if it's actively bad and they're saying, NIH is very fraudulent, NIH is wasteful, I don't like indirect rates, it's just a big shell game, I would say lean on the personal. They can argue with you about data. They can argue with you about philosophy. What they can't argue with you about is your experience. So you can say, in my experience, this is how the indirect funding was used to support my lab. In my experience, the grant funds went toward these kinds of things. In my experience, they can't argue with your experience.
I hope, yeah, I totally endorse that, especially if they say things like, NIH is corrupt. Start with in my experience. You can also do a little bit, oh, is there a specific concern you have that I could maybe answer a question about? Because sometimes you'll get some of these generic statements, right? If the person that you're meeting with is just saying that to be provocative, then you will kind of catch them off their game a little bit. And then you can redirect the conversation. If they say, well, I've just heard. And you can say, well, in my experience, and pivot back to that too. So the pivot is really important. You can also gently say, well, I understand you might be concerned, but in my experience. So I really do recommend it. Some of the worst meetings I've been in, I'll be honest, the constituent wasn't prepared for the meeting. So the worst meeting I was ever in was with the health policy director for a member of Congress from a northeastern state. This member of Congress was a well-known supporter of NIH funding, and the day before our meeting had actually signed on to a letter, actually led a letter urging his colleagues to increase funding for NIH. And the letter put out a press release about it, put it on social media, right? The constituent, I was accompanying the constituent, walked into the meeting. The constituent was super excited, told her story, made a big plea for NIH funding, and the staff person said, thanks. But the person I work for, the member of Congress, just led a letter to his colleagues asking them to increase funding. I'm sorry you missed that. And now, should the staffer have acted that way? Absolutely not. But was somewhat justified because was meeting with a constituent who obviously did not do their homework. So I would say fundamentally, before you go into any meeting with a member of Congress or their staff, at a very minimum, take a quick glance. What are they putting out on social? What's on their website? If you are not sure, call ASBMB or look at ASBMB social and take that time to do some homework so you don't embarrass yourself.
Yes, that's all great advice. Let's see what I have for another question. Um, so this is a good question. Is it more effective to meet with with your congressional member when they are in their home district rather than meet with their staff or meet with them in Washington, D.C.?
I'm happy to jump in, Adrian, and then talk with you. So I'm going to start with in my experience. So in my experience, the best meetings advocates have had that I've worked with at ASSA have been at home in the district where they can talk about the local impact of the research and it's a little bit more relevant. Also, fun tip, members of Congress, when they're home, most of them are more focused, hyper focused on what's happening with their constituents in their states, in their cities, because they don't have the noise of Washington in the background. No one's yelling in that they're 15 minutes late for a hearing, or that the president of the local university just showed up in their office unannounced, or they are needing at a caucus meeting, in 5 minutes, or the car is waiting out front to take them somewhere else. So their schedules while they're home are busy, but they're a little bit. So every time I've met with someone or I've talked to someone who's had a meeting at home, I will also say that the meetings that we've had at home have been longer. When you're in DC, you often get that 15-minute bum rush because they don't have a lot of time. Based on what I've heard, I've known that meetings at home that were scheduled for 30 minutes ran an hour because the aide was so interested in talking with the person, they didn't want to go home. They didn't want to end it.
Yes, friendly amendment. I think uh, understanding the risk of exhausting the audience, I would say both and, right? I mean, I think you meet the staffer in Washington, you invite them. When you're in the district, we would love to meet with you. The thing to understand, and I like to give context for this, is that the staffer in DC and the staffer in the district work together. The reason to get to know the staffer in the district is because the staffer in the district makes recommendations about what the member should go see,
Mhm.
what the member should care about in the district. They are experts on the district. So if there are impacts that are happening locally, they're going to feed that information up to the congressman and to the staffer. They're also going to say, you know what, we have this really cool, very articulate researcher. I'd love for you, congressman, to meet with him or her when you're in the district next. That's their job. The policy staffer is in DC, and they're the ones recommending you should vote yes, you should vote no, you should write an amendment, you should write a letter, you should do this, that, and the other thing. So they work together. So the staffer in DC does have some influence to say, hey, I've been talking to this researcher. They have some valid concerns. Maybe the congressman should go visit. But that's the split. And that's why you both want to know the person who's recommending where the congressman goes and conveying what the local impact is, and the person who's recommending the votes and the letters and the amendments and all the things.
I think those are some very good recommendations. So at ASB&B, we have a lot of our membership that are international. This question kind of comes from that lens. So for international students, is it appropriate and permissible to attend the Capitol Hill Day and speak with congressional offices? And are there any considerations that they should keep in mind, given the current policy environment?
Jennifer, you go first. I have thoughts, but you go first.
Okay. I would say generally, yes, it is appropriate to attend. Again, make sure you have some connection though, right? Are you a postdoc in a lab at the university in the district? Are you a graduate student there? Are you a tech kind of thing? So make sure, it doesn't matter if you're here as an international student, make sure you have some kind of connection. The second part of that question is probably the one that's a little bit more challenging, again, given the current environment. I think you should not be especially worried about that if you go in and it's very clear why you're there, right? You're here to talk about funding for biomedical research. This is not a meeting to talk about immigration issues, those kinds of things. What's nice about having the international perspective in these meetings is science doesn't really recognize borders, right? The next pandemic isn't going to be like, oh, stop, I'm not going to get into the United States of America. I'm going to Greenland instead. So you can talk about the collaborative nature of science and why work together and the opportunities that we have here in the United States to train graduate students from different countries and things like that. So I think, it's sort of very dependent on the situation. It may depend on the person you're meeting with as well, too. I would say, given the current environment, if you're at all uncomfortable with the idea of doing that, then that's perfectly fine, right? We do not want to create a situation where you don't feel comfortable. But I think if you stick to your talking points and the authentic self, and maybe even address, I came to the United States to pursue a PhD because that can blunt some of the political issues.
I would totally agree. I think that in this case, I would do a lot more of the sort of cyber research that Jennifer suggested earlier. I would check if they're going to be hostile to you no matter what, it's not worth your mental health.
Yeah.
You're not going to change their minds. However, what is happening? There is a huge impact on research, what's happening at the State Department, how the visas are being processed, what the opportunities are. I think that the perspective of the international students is a very unique perspective that I think members of Congress do need to hear. And so I very much encourage you to talk about it, but to, like Jennifer said, make it very personal. This is why I really wanted to do this work here. I could not do this any other place. Or I've always wanted to live in Indiana, whatever it is. I'm a Midwesterner. I think there are people who've always wanted to live in the Midwest. Um, I think be personal, be relevant to what is the impact on their district.
You can also appeal to ego. Well, I came to the US because you guys are the world leader in biomedical research. That flattery will often smooth over some ruffled waters too.
Yeah. Definitely. I agree with both of those viewpoints. And also, I would like to point out for any member who is international that we have had previous international students participate in our Capitol Hill days. And we had no problem at all. So I just wanted to kind of add that little bit of nugget as well. So this question was a combination of questions in terms of contact information. So
Mm.
what are the best ways in which staffers can contact you afterwards? Should the Hill Day participant or a person attending the meeting give a business card, share their email? What would be the best way for them to follow up?
I'm going to let the former staffer address that first, and then I could co-sign
You're
what
going
he
to
said.
write a thank you note. I mean, per what Jennifer said,
Yeah.
you're going to write a thank you note and you're going to be in their email box. And you're going to say, we had such a great meeting. It was so interesting hearing about blah, blah, blah. As a reminder, I've attached whatever Rachel tells you to attach. Um, and then in 3 months, if there's a vote, you can reply back to your own email and say, hey, just touching base. Thank you so much that your boss voted in favor of. Or, you're going to get an alert from Rachel that's going to say,
Mhm.
Congress just voted, blah, 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 blah. And you're going to click on it and you're going to say, how did my member? You can express some disappointment. How sad to see that the congressman voted against
Mhm.
this. Do you have any concerns that I could maybe answer? You're going to start building that relationship.
Yeah. You can certainly ask the person you're meeting with too, do you prefer email or phone kind of thing. Generally, I recommend an email address that you have access to that you check frequently. So don't give them your Gmail if you don't check it. And a number, a telephone number where they can reach you easily. So if you never pick up your office phone and don't know how to log into your office voicemail, give them a personal phone number. But all of the above. And yes, ASB&B will not raise the bat signal about something unless it's really important. So if you do get an action alert, and same thing for CLS, from CLS or
CLS doesn't do
ASB&B.
action
Oh, you
alerts.
don't? Okay, never mind that. Disregard. If you get an action alert from ASB&B or a FASB, that bat signal is important. We need you to take action.
Yes, definitely. And definitely be on the outlook for any action alerts possibly coming up um, in conjunction with our um, Hill Day this year and with the annual meeting. So be on the lookout for those action alerts. Another question here in terms of speaking with specific senators. So this one question is asking, is it even worth it to speak to maybe certain senators who may um, may have a different point of view from you, such as in Texas, maybe with Senator Cruz. Their vote seems to always be based on what the White ha maybe in conjunction with their party and not necessarily their constituents.
Of
Agent, I'm
course.
happy. Yeah, yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. I
Yeah.
mean, if we self-censor ourselves,
Mhm.
right? If we decide we're not going to talk to people who disagree with us, then they have no reason to change their minds. Also, members of Congress have a lot of ways to act,
Mhm.
right? So we don't know what Ted Cruz says when he picks up the phone to the White House Leg Affairs office or the OMB, it's called a PAD, policy something director. Um, They have a lot of interactions that are off the record.
Mhm.
That's okay. If Ted Cruz says, guys, you're killing me at home, can you just knock it off? That's worth 100 Tammy Baldwins saying, knock it off, right? If you can get those deep red Republicans to care even a little, even on an ancillary issue, maybe they're never going to ask for more funding. But
Mhm.
maybe they would say, this multi-year funding thing is not a great idea. Everybody's got something they can do.
Their personal situations also change too. I have lobbied congressional offices where it was like talking to a brick wall. The member of Congress was never ever going to care about NIH. They had bigger fish to fry. There was no research in their district. And then a family member or loved one got diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. And all of a sudden, the importance of biomedical research hit home. I've also seen the economic arguments. Right? So there was a Midwestern senator, I will not out, but was in the House of Representatives before joining the Senate. When he was in the House, kind of a flamethrower, fiscal conservative, didn't want to spend money on anything. And then he moved into the Senate. The big university in his state was applying for their official designation as a National Cancer Institute designated cancer center. You know who I'm talking about, Adrian.
I do now.
Yeah. And so when the university explained and started lobbying the senator, hey, this will bring jobs and most importantly, healthcare to our state, world-class healthcare, all of a sudden the senator was a lot more interested, in part because he had moved from the House to the Senate and now had to care about the entire state, not just his. And today is one of the biggest evangelists for NIH funding that I have come across in my entire 30 career as a lobbyist. So again, situations change. So if at first you do not succeed, try again.
Definitely. So oh, sorry, if you want to say
Okay,
something
I would
else.
say, yeah, one more thing too. Do not overlook your friends either. The worst meeting I had, and I will out this person as an advocate, was with Steny Hoyer, Congressman from Maryland, who actually just sadly announced his retirement. I was new here at FASB and went in to see him, and the first thing he and his chief of staff said was, "Where the heck have you all been? This is the first time in 4 years you've requested a meeting, and I'm one of the biggest NIH champions. Did you just think it was okay to ignore me?" That was an awkward meeting. So also go and make sure you see your friends, and you're not, they know what you want, but they'll be glad to see you, and they may say, "Look, I'm on your side. You're preaching to the choir," and you can and say, "Thank you for listening."
I'm glad
And
you said
also,
that.
those meetings are good for your soul,
They
right? So
are.
you need to have meetings with people who fundamentally agree with you just to remember that they exist,
Yes.
because that's going to carry you through any meetings that are bad. You need a phenomenal meeting to offset a bad meeting.
Yes.
Yes, I'm so glad you said that because we often get a lot of questions if it's worth it to go to an office where you know that they have always supported or they're champions for your issue. And I tell them, yes, it definitely is worth it. So we have
So
two.
I'm gonna try out a line on you guys that I've been shopping around the different societies that I've been speaking at, and it's something I've been thinking a lot about. This is not a marathon, but it's not a sprint either.
That's right.
It's a relay race.
Hmm.
It's a relay race because we're gonna be in this for 4 years,
Yes.
3 years,
Yes.
hopefully. That means that do what you can when you can.
Hmm.
And when you're tired, don't just drop it and walk away. Hand the baton to somebody else. When you have a big grant due, or you are finishing a dissertation, or whatever is going on in your life, do what you need to do. Be the person you are. Be the best version of who you are. Take up the baton when you can. Pass it on when you can't.
I think that's really great. So we have a couple of questions here. Um, And I'll let these last three questions be the last. This question is specifically for you, Jennifer. Um, if you're not allowed by your employer to identify your affiliation with them, how are you best able to communicate to elected officials or staffers about local impacts of proposed asks?
I think you can just say, I live in the state or I live in the district and I work here. You don't have to say, just say, I work here. And I've seen firsthand the importance of funding for biomedical research. We have a great hospital here. We have a wonderful clinic, those kinds of things. So you can sort of allude to, how you know about this without directly saying, I work for the University of Maine. So if that becomes a problem, you can also say, I've benefited firsthand biomedical research. I recently had a mammogram. I learned, I don't have cancer and I get to go back in a year. And that's thanks to the power of biomedical research. Or, I have a family member who has type 2 diabetes and they just got prescribed a new drug and they're doing so much better now with their health because of that. So you can sort of dance around that.
Mm.
Most of the time, though, I will be
Yeah.
surprised if your university or institution tells you that you can't even
Yeah.
say that
I
you
would be
work
too.
there.
Yeah.
That feels like a freedom of speech issue. Like,
Hmm.
it is true that you work there. You
Yeah.
get to have your own opinion no matter who you work for.
Right.
That's part of being an American currently. So, be who you are. It's okay. I doubt that your university will say no. If they
Yeah.
do, you can kind of push back on them a little bit before the meeting and just be like, I'm not going to say, like, you
Yeah.
can even say, I don't represent the university in this meeting. I'm
100%.
here with ASMBMB. I'm here with FASEB.
Hmm.
I'm not representing the university, but I do
Right.
work there.
Yeah, absolutely. That is, yeah, even if you are under restrictions, that is perfectly reasonable to say that.
Yes, and I think that kind of tied into another question that we had here in terms of someone was asking about credibility, and to show your local impact if you can't necessarily, if you feel,
Mhm.
or if your institution doesn't allow you to act to state your affiliation with them. Definitely, you can always say that you're here on behalf of ASBMB if you can't or you feel uncertain about um, saying your university.
Yeah. And I think you may have to explain what ASBMB is, but you
Yes.
can use that as an example to promote ASBMB. We're a scientific society representing scientists across the country.
Hmm. Yes. And so for our last question, which I think kind of goes into a lot of what Adrian has been saying throughout this session is asking, is it best to have a script that you audition, practice with to present to the staffer, or um, should you familiar? Let me see how this. Is it best to have a script that you audition slash practice with yourself for how to present, or
Yeah, the answer is
okay,
yes.
okay. I'm
I'll
trying to
just
make out
stop
what
you
you're
right
saying.
there.
Yeah.
Um, it's called an elevator pitch for a
Mhm.
reason,
Yeah.
right? So I would practice your, 1 minute. Who are you? What do you do? What do you work on? Why do you work on it? I think figuring out, quite often in science, we recommend having a metaphor. So figure out like what is your science and can you explain it directly or do you need a metaphor to make it understandable? Um, Try out your metaphor on different people and be like, well, I was thinking that it's sort of like this. Try it out on your wife or your husband or your cousin or whoever. Um, so that you know that it makes sense and you are practiced in who you are and what you do. That's not going to hurt you anywhere you go. And my personal opinion is that the American public right now needs to know a scientist because
Mhm.
we're being told over and over again that scientists are faking their results, they're
Mhm.
fraudulent, they're wasteful, they haven't done anything about cancer, right? We're hearing all these things. It's gaslighting.
Mhm.
And the way to combat gaslighting is with personal experience. When you are at a cookout in your neighborhood, probably not right now, but when you are at a Christmas party or a Seder or wherever you are, if someone asks you what you do, I know what y'all do. I know what you do is you say, "Oh, I'm a professor at the university. Oh, you keep it vague. Don't. I want that elevator pitch. I want that 1 minute. I have a lab at the local university. I study XYZ. I guarantee you, People will ask, people are interested. Your neighbors need to know that they know a scientist. And that scientist is a nice person. They're a good mom. They're a good neighbor. They're a good dog walker. They love their dog, right? Like we need to see scientists as people and people that we know and people that we like and people that we trust.
100% to all of that. The other advantage of having a practice speech is it will allow you to pivot back and pivot back and pivot back if someone tries to throw you off message. Mhm.
Mhm. Absolutely. Well, thank you so much. We have reached the top of the hour. Thank you both, Jennifer and Adrian, so much for sharing all these wonderful insights. This has been wonderful. For all the attendees, just want to share the ASB&B Public Affairs email in the chat. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to us. Uh, and yes, just hope that everyone has a wonderful afternoon.
Bye.
All right.
Bye-bye.